when we graph their different markets, Google business profiles, how each of these different GBPs is performing, what you're seeing is the places where we had what we believed was a moat, they're actually losing ground, and their newer locations are gaining ground. And what's basically happening is in their moat areas, the places where they were super, super strong, you've got bigger competitors coming in and eating up part of that market share.
Sharp strategies, sweet success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I am your host, Tiffany Swedensky. And today I have Conrad Saam of Mockingbird Marketing. I think it's just Mockingbird, though, right?
You know, it's a funny brand problem. I want it to be Mockingbird, and everyone says Mockingbird Marketing. And I remember when I was at Avo, some people referred to it as like an acronym, like they called it AVVO. And it was like, well, as long as someone's talking about it, like that's fine. So I think I've given up my really kind of draconian approach to like, it's Mockingbird, it's Mockingbird, it's Mockingbird, because it was a losing battle.
Yeah. I don't know why, because in my head it's Mockingbird, but Mockingbird
Good?
Marketing kind of rolls off the tongue a little bit.
It
So
does,
I
yeah.
couldn't stop myself, I guess. So I've known at least of Conrad for a very long time in the legal marketing universe. You know, it's kind of a small world, I guess you'd
It's a
say. So
small
I've heard
world.
about him for a long time. I think we first met just a few months ago at the summit, the GLM summit back in October. And
Yep.
I'm also a fan of the legal marketing lunch hour. Definitely listen every week, every other week. And so I appreciate all the content and episodes that you and Guy put out. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm not good at a lot of things. I love podcasting. I love recording podcasts and just kind of riffing on this stuff. It's good stuff.
Yeah. So, what are you planning for 2026? This is the end of the year podcast I'm recording. I'm kind of asking everyone the same question, but what are your goals? What are your future plans looking like for the next 12 months?
So it's surprisingly clear for me what 2026 should look like for law firm marketers. And there's two elements to that. Number one is I do not want people to get so fixated on doing everything about AI that they forget all of the other components. And what you're seeing right now is every single conference is now an AI conference. Every single talk at every single conference now has an AI bent to it. Every person who's trying to make themselves look smart has something to say about AI. And the SEO guys are now trying to reinvent themselves as AI people. It is a component of marketing. It's a component of running your firm. It's a component of how we live. It's going to change the way we interact with things. All of those things are true. Having said that, if you put all of your effort into solving what is going to be 10% of the market next year, you're toast. And
Yeah.
so it's not important. We do AI work for our clients. We have two different products. We do these building blocks and we have a deeper dive like this. All this stuff that we do from an AI perspective. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying what really is important is if you only think about that, you guys are going to fail. Like 3 years ago, everyone was excited about LSAs for a while. And now we've kind of forgotten. They're still really big, right? If you want to think about growing your firm, I would rather win the LSA game than the AI game in 2026, right? From a pure volume perspective, like that's the game that you want to play. So again, two really clear things for me. One is not fixate myopically on AI. The other part of it, and this is becoming increasingly important and it's becoming increasingly creative in my mind, is understanding all of the chess pieces that are available to a law firm and understanding which, and by chess pieces is a simplistic analogy around marketing channels, understanding which of those chess pieces your firm should be playing, should be even aware of, and understand those ones where you're like, we're going to get killed, right? We cannot compete in this with this marketing channel, which is fine. What are the ones that you can play in? And I think what's happening now, Tiffany, and it started to happen like 2 years ago. It's like picking up. And now I think in 26, 27, this will accelerate. The more unique niche kind of marketing campaigns, channels, approaches are actually going to start paying off. So I think that becomes really, really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, the trend, and I recorded another podcast earlier today, and they talked about how they were pivoting back to brand marketing. And that's the cycle I think that everyone is in right now. We collectively, but there were direct response marketing, these direct lead generation strategies that we were using for years. And now we're going back to what's important. And what's important is brand mentions, because those can capture, those can be scraped by AI search, thought leadership, and none of it is particularly new. It's, the same old stuff, marketing principles, just kind of in new clothes because of this new existential threat, AI marketing. And so it's interesting how everyone's circling back to like the basics, more or less. And what's funny is I'm speaking at an AI conference actually in January, the AI
Okay.
for PI Expo. And half the conference is about like how to capture like, I guess, rankings and AI search. But my talk is about like how do we use these AI tools, which for me is honestly a little bit more interesting. Like I couldn't run my business the way I do without AI tools. And it's so incredible.
I think there's more immediate gains from AI to be had from running tool. I'll use a very simplistic example, and it ties into marketing because that's all I can talk about. Using AI to do lead scoring, right? And then having a different approach for hot leads versus warm leads and having the right way, like that's amazing. And you can implement that right now. The key to me with AI, the big wins that you can have with AI right now really are focused around what you can do with your firm. And I'll use a simplistic example, and that is lead scoring. So we can now use AI to understand the difference between a really hot lead and a good lead, but not something that you're going to step out of the boardroom meeting to go pick up and follow up on. And you can have automated different workflows, et cetera. That's there right now. And it's really good. Maddox has that. Filevine has that. Clio debuted that. Now they all do it somewhat differently, but like you can plug into that right now. And that's the kind of thing that I get really excited about for law firms. Now, from a marketing perspective, it's actually really important because I want my clients to make more money doing with what we're currently doing for them. If they can convert the really, really hot, the great leads at a slightly higher rate because of AI, their marketing's working better, right? And so those are the type of things that I get really excited about. The problem with, and you mentioned this, trying to evaluate how you're doing in AI, you need to understand how the tools are actually determining ranking and how you're performing. And because this is so amazingly personalized, and because, with the exception of Google, they actually can't scrape data, you're not getting understanding of if you run this search based on computer sampling as opposed to what actual users are doing. So you're guessing, you're all guessing.
I saw a post today on LinkedIn, and I can't remember who posted it. It might have been Guy, but there's Chrome extensions basically that are scraping your AI conversations that you have with Claude and ChatGPT. And I looked at the list, and they all, if you hear that and you're suddenly worried, they appear to be like VPN plugins. So if you have like a plugin that's supposed to act as a VPN, you might want to check it out. But that's one way I've heard these like AI ranking tools are determining how your brand shows up in AI. But you have to question the data sampling there, right? You're getting data from people who have installed kind of a specific type of plugin, like a VPN. It's probably not sampling 100% of their conversations. And who the heck knows if that small group is the rate in which they actually look for attorneys. So like how often is the data going to be relevant to the legal industry? And so
That's
there's,
right.
there's a lot of question marks there, but I think that's the thing that I just have to roll my eyes. Like we can't, it's so hard to track how we're ranking in AI search, and the searches are so personalized.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. That's the problem. The only entity that really has that data, I'm probably wrong about that, but the only entity that I can think of that really has that data is Google through Chrome, and they only have it for what they can see. And whether or not they're actually monitoring other AI platforms for how they work, like now you have antitrust. Like I can't imagine they would do that. I can't imagine they would do that. And yet I've been surprised by some of the things that Google has done in the past. So like maybe I'm still naive about how Google works. but they're not going to share that data. Like they have the one thing that Google has demonstrated convincingly over the last 5, if not 8 years, is that they are holding their data much closer to the vest than they used to. They've done that with LSA. Look at LSAs versus pay-per-click, for example. Like they're not going to share that data until they start monetizing it.
Well, and I was talking with somebody yesterday, and this is a through the grapevine thing. Like somebody was telling me they were talking to like an SEO team, and the SEO team said, "Oh, we talked to somebody who's works at Google, who's a part of that team at Google, and they said that you shouldn't do this SEO thing." Anyway, that they were asking me, like, does that sound right? And I'm like if a Google employee is sharing company secrets with some random company, like Google's gonna fire them. That's like one like a somebody act, misconduct, I think probably because Google doesn't want people knowing how their search works.
Yeah.
And just think about it for a second. Like, why would Google share that? And why would Google employees share that with other people? I just always hated that. Like, we know somebody at Google. It's like, okay. But anyway.
Well, back in the this is when I was like super young at this, but people would get a picture of Matt Cutts standing at their booth and like act like he was on their board. It's just like, come on, guys. Come on.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. You're embarrassing everyone, including Matt, and he's being nice about it.
Yeah. So definitely AI is kind of changing things and we're all in this pivot. Honestly, it's really refreshing because me personally, I was starting to get bored with the same old when it came to marketing. And now we're just talking about like a whole new set of new things. And I mean, like, what are you looking at? Like, how are you changing your approach to marketing for yourself, for Mockingbird, just whatever?
From an AI perspective or etc.
Well, I guess etc. I mean,
Okay.
we're kind of talking about AI because that's the force that has changed
Yeah.
marketing so much, but it doesn't have to be about that.
For me, the etc. is that, and there's a bunch of these. It's really, I kind of alluded to the chess piece example, but we're really leaning heavily on the chess example or analogy. I want to know, like, there's basics. What's the volume of traffic on your site and what is the size of your database? Based on that, you should or should not be sending out a regular weekly email. You should or should not be doing display advertising. You should or should not be running video ads on YouTube, right? So let me give a different example. What is your target market and how can I reach them? So am I taking advantage of, let's say I'm a personal injury lawyer, which is most of my examples, but how do I put my ads in households that I know have a motorcycle registered to that address? How do I do that? And in what months? Right. So like I keep talking about these like other chess pieces that we can be playing. Like that's extreme targeting. Other things are like, am I a magnanimous person that really likes being involved in my community? Is that reflected in what I'm doing on my website, on social media in general? And by and large, it's absolutely not. How do I make sure that the things that I'm doing, and by the way, most law firms think they're involved in their community and you're not. Like just putting your logo on the back of the turkey trot t-shirt, like that's not really being involved in the community. I mean, like a lot of your time is spent being involved in I'll use Ben Glass because he's such a great example of that. Ben spends a ton of time refereeing soccer, right? And like people know him for that. And if you've ever had kids who played soccer, you like him more because you know the abuse that every single soccer referee puts up with, right? That's what he does. And he's deeply involved. And he uses that as a vehicle to talk about giving back and being a good person and the lessons of life and blah, blah, blah. That's the type of thing that I'd love to see. But if you're not that type of person who's deeply involved in your community, like don't play that chess piece. There's so many, like, how do we maximize what we're getting out of local service ads, right? Like there are all these little different elements. Should we have another office? Should we not have an office? Should we have fewer offices? Did we overexpand? Like I call it the centipede strategy, but like, what is this needs to be part of your strategy. What is our geographical footprint in office space? And that is a marketing expense. It's not a real estate or a mortgage expense. It is a lease expense. It's a location strategy, right? And everyone should have one.
Yeah. Whenever I'm talking to a law firm and we're talking about working together, and you know how these interviews go, like for me, it's a lot of questions like, what tools are you using? What are you doing now? What are you doing? And some people are like, can you just give me the plan? Like, just give me the roadmap. And there really isn't a roadmap because a lot depends on the owner and how the owner wants to grow and how they're willing to participate in the marketing. Because unless you just go, You hire actors to record your videos and you outsource all the marketing to agencies and just create like your business is advertised by a spokesperson, which, that's the path a lot of law firms take. The owner is still involved in some capacity in the marketing. And so it's important to like plot out the kind of marketing that you're going to do and what'll work for you at your scale, at your size, and how to build upon that. Because like small law firm, not wanting to spend much money as far as marketing budget, they don't need to do PPC naturally.
Right. Right.
And there's a lot of ways to reach our target audience. And I think we tend to forget that when everyone's talking AI, Google, LinkedIn. These are not the only things. These are not the only types of marketing that exist. And I'm always surprising people by bringing them up.
It does seem that there are a lot of, I find this especially in the SEO world, where there's kind of formulaic deliverables, right? I'm going to do X number of blog posts and X number of links, and they're going to have a DR of Y, and like we're just going to churn that out over the next 12 months, and it's going to make a change. I've always looked at this world, and maybe this is why my agency isn't massive, but like I've always looked at this as a bespoke approach to your business objectives, your competitive reality, and your existing assets or liabilities, right? And so you have to look at those three different things, put them together, and understand for your firm, we should be doing these things and not those things. And like that's where marketing starts to work. And I find a lot of people believe that they're pay-per-click people. You believe that you should run pay-per-click. I talk to SEOs who are like, I can get any law firm to rank anywhere. I just need to. And you're like, really? I don't think so. SEO might not be the right game for every single law firm. In fact, it's definitely not the right game for every single law firm. And so it really is about understanding, again, business objectives, competitive sets, and assets and liabilities, and mapping out what you want to do, what you can do with that, and how to maximize that.
Yeah, not every firm needs SEO, but every firm needs a website. Like I'm still in that camp because the website's more than SEO. And I try to
100%.
that, yeah, it's more than just like Google for sure. What are the questions that you're getting from attorneys now about marketing, SEO, AI, anything in that realm?
Interestingly, we just finished annual planning with someone. These are the questions that I think attorneys should be asking, and I'm hearing it from some of my clients. What's going on in the industry, right? We've got Arizona, we've got consolidation, we've got larger firms are now being competing across larger. So that geographic expansion thing is happening everywhere, right? And so what does that mean? What should I be doing? How do we play the game, right? So like I'll use Top Dog as an example, but if this exists elsewhere, should I have a relationship with Top Dog or should I be terrified of them? How do I respond to someone coming into the market and like you get a Morgan's the other punching bag, they're coming into my market. What am I supposed to do? Right. I will say my most prescient, thoughtful, big picture clients are asking me those questions. And the answers are hard, right? Like I don't really have great answers. I had this conversation with a great client. This is a client they've done very, very well. They work the centipede strategy. They've got lots of locations. And what they have found in the last year, and I was nervous to kind of share this data with them, but they already knew it because they're a smart client. Like they have had a moat around their primary locations, right? And so they've just killed it. And basically they out operated and outspent everyone who were in these markets. And what we've seen is now if you were to when we graph their different markets, Google business profiles, how each of these different GBPs is performing, what you're seeing is the places where we had what we believed was a moat, they're actually losing ground, and their newer locations are gaining ground. And what's basically happening is in their moat areas, the places where they were super, super strong, you've got bigger competitors coming in and eating up part of that market share. And in the same way, they're moving into other markets and bringing their level of sophistication into other smaller markets. And they're now gaining some of that market share. So it is becoming a we're moving from like JV to varsity or college, like if to use a sports ball analogy, like it's getting more difficult to play the game. And so we have to be more sophisticated in how we play the game.
Yeah, I was talking with an attorney who I'm going to try to leave out names, but a big law firm in their state basically opened an office across the street and seemingly overnight, got a couple hundred reviews.
Oh
And
yeah.
all of a sudden, we were not ranking nearly as well as we were before. And it's hard to tell the attorney, like, look, if we want to get back up there, our level of effort needs to somewhat match theirs because they didn't just click
That's
their
right.
fingers and open up a Google business listing. They have systems for getting more reviews.
That's right.
And you do have to level up like your internal marketing systems to match those when you have that big competitor move in the area. And unfortunately, it usually means like more money, more talent, more focus and, other more things, I guess. Can't think of anything else to add to the list though. So
No, but the list includes things like understanding what it takes to run a larger business. Your operations have to be great. Your intake has to be amazing. You have to be willing to take lower value cases because there is a volume game to all of this. You have to be really good at finding and identifying the really high value cases and getting as much out of them as they can. I'll go so far, and this is not really marketing, but in any other business, this would be more. We don't think of this as marketing, but in any other business, this is a component of marketing. How do you maximize the value of the opportunities that come into the office, right? So, like, how many of them are going to trial? Are we actually getting as much value out of every single matter that we possibly can? That's a marketing problem that law firms don't think of as a marketing problem. It's an operations problem. But like any other business, you think about how do I maximize the lifetime value of this client, right? Well, you're mostly doing one-offs, which means you need to maximize the value of the matter. That needs to be part of the marketing equation when you're dealing with these more sophisticated businesses because someone else is thinking about that. And if you need to compete on that level, you need to be thinking about that as well.
oh yeah. And then call one of these businesses and see how quickly they pick up the phone, what their systems are like. Are you sent to voicemail or reception or what? Because, and this is my like fringe conspiracy theory, but I truly believe like where Google can monitor our inbound phone calls, even outside of local service ads, like where Google can monitor phone calls to our business. I think they're tracking like how our intake teams perform. I think how our intake teams perform
100%.
is a soft ranking factor. And we know that's true with local service ads. And we know Google is just greedy for data and will do downright shady things to collect it. So, like, in a way, like, and I don't like to blend intake and marketing because that's sales and marketing, and those are traditionally independent. But what happens on the phone at your law firm is critically important to how Google will perceive and ultimately rank your business. At least that's what I think. I don't know. Maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, but
I don't
uh,
disagree at all. We haven't talked about intake whisper. I call it training the dragon, how to train your dragon, right? Like intake whispering into Google's ears as a part of how they build a picture of your business. Like they've been explicit about LSAs. In LSAs, they tell you what they're listening for. They're listening for pricing information. They're listening for biography information. They're listening for what you do, and they're listening for, and I don't think this applies to law firms, but like special promotions, right? So like 2 for 1. Hopefully, there's no 2 for 1s in legal, but they tell you what they're listening for. So, like, start feeding the dragon what it needs to hear, right? They also want to know, like, if people are sent to your law firm, do you help them or not? If most of your calls are like, hey, we don't handle that, move on, or your case isn't big enough, or you don't make enough money, move on, like, you're literally telling the entity that is sending you business that this is business that you do not want, right? And that is happening on phone calls. So, intake, overpay your intake people and have really careful training about how they deal with people, but also how they deal with who's listening. Because I think of that as being part of the marketing engine as well, because you're feeding that data back in. It's so important.
well, and I think there's an element of the owner needs to be really serious about intake as well. Because I've worked with law firms where the owner won't tolerate mistakes. I mean, and it seems mean, but they're really good at coaching and managing their team. Everyone is happy there. They just know like there's practically zero tolerance for letting a phone not calling leads back, letting it ring too long. And we're always monitoring the systems to try to make those things better. And then you have the law firm owners who want to make intake more comfortable for their intake team. So they set up things that sound nice, like, oh, I'll do all the intakes. You just take their information, or we don't have to document the bad leads. Let's just document the good leads. And when you're doing things like that, particularly with documentation, like if 20 people call your law firm, only 5 end up in your system, and somebody is telling you, well, the others aren't qualified, how do you know? Like, you
Right.
don't know. You're just taking it on faith. And that's why it's just so important to, one, care and convey that you care to your teams, and just be very serious about take intake seriously. A lot of people don't.
I think that I think one of the most common mistakes on intake is you take the most experienced intake person and you make them the intake manager, right? And that is a problem. I think the person who listens in on intake or manages that entire process needs to be someone who doesn't work in it, who's really has the ability to make change. Also, who's going to take the time to proactively manage intake and recognize that it's going to take 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week. And that amount of time is actually really well spent. If you sit down and you say, we're going to listen to your best call and your worst call from this week, and know that that tells people that people are listening, that we care, that we're working to manage and correct and reward awesomeness. So I think that's one piece. There is, and this is not my business, but there's a great intake AI. We talk about AI and tools. Check out Speed AI. Great. Hayden Haskins and his brother. When they first showed this off, it was like 2 years ago. And it was like basically what the Speed AI does is it listens in on intake and it scores every single call, and it tries to evaluate whether or not you need to get someone else involved to try and do a save of what was a really good lead. Now that's lead scoring. We talked about that earlier. When they originally launched this, I was like, this is really cool. Can I see it? And it was like, well, it's a PowerPoint and we think it might be like, we might build it. They've built it now and it's pretty awesome. So intake as a
I,
component of marketing. Like I know you said like it's the difference between sales and marketing, but like there's a lot of this stuff that's filtering into making law firms successful. And intake has been kind of at the lowest of low hanging fruits because we don't really respect our intake people and we underpay them.
Well, there's that. And then also when you think about like what are the jobs out there where the dominant thing you do is use the phone? It's call centers,
Yeah.
telemarketing. And that's an undesirable job for a lot of people. I mean, that's just a fact. I did telemarketing, so I feel like I have the authority to say such. And, there's very few people who are like, I want to be on the phones all day. But there are also quite a few people who wouldn't mind being on the phones and like talking to people, who like giving a good customer experience. And you can find them. Like, it is not hard to find a good intake person, but it shouldn't be like a cheap employee, or it shouldn't be somebody who you're
That's
paying,
right.
I don't know what a really cheap salary is these days, 35, 40,000 a year, and you're just crossing your fingers and hope it works out. It needs somebody who has a level of professionalism, I guess, or accountability for the role and how they do, for sure. So I guess what else is new at Mockingbird? Are you guys launching any new products or making any changes, or is it just a fresh start, new year kind of thing?
So this is much more internal than external. We have over the last 2 years completely revamped our leadership stack.
Wow.
And so I have, depending on how you count it, 2 to 4 people in our leadership team that have not been involved, who are no more than 2 years old there. And that's been our biggest change. And it's been, I mean, this is like one of those things like from pure experience, like now that I've experienced this, like it's so obvious, but we weren't really on the same page before. We had 4 people that were roughly moving in a similar direction, but like that doesn't really work. And so I would say at this point in time, we now have a really dedicated understanding of where we want to go. This whole chess piece thing, like when you try and run the chess pieces, some people have little chess pieces that they like more than others. And when they have a leadership role, like we move too heavy in that direction, we move too heavy in that direction. And so, like, it's really about our clients and understanding what works for our clients and having that client centricity as opposed to like, what are things I like to build because I like to build things. And so that's been a really big shift. The happy end result of that is better financials because we're not blowing a ton of money on stuff that we weren't really agreed on. So we're performing better, but it's really around the chess pieces and really being unified on that vision, which sounds really kind of corny, who moved my cheese ish, but like I've watched it happen over 2 years and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's when you own a business and you go through a few cycles, like you do reach a point where you're like, duh, it was so obvious. Like,
I know.
like I should have done it this way, or I should have done it that way, or I shouldn't have bought that, should have bought this. And it's so relatable when you do like run a company and just trying to do your
Oh,
best the whole time. You still end up finding things you wish you did differently, which is, I guess, part of the fun of it. You
I
know?
find that like this has hit me, it's hit me twice, really like straight across the face, where I have had coaches or consultants who I feel like I said to this to Lisa, I was like, Lisa, I feel like you're 300 years old. I feel like you've had 300 years worth of experience, but it's just because she does this as a consultant over and over again. Lisa was just badgering me about our accounting firm, just over and over, like, you need, and she would not let go. And I was like, Lisa, they're fine. And finally I rolled and we replaced them. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not see this? Right. And so my takeaway for this is like, I want to have consultants and coaches and the professionals that I work with. I want it to feel like they are 300 years old, that they've got like 300 years worth of experience where they can walk in and be like, that's really stupid, Connor. And I'm like, no, that's fine. And they're like, no, 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 it really is stupid. So I've done that with accounting, with kind of CFO level people. I've done it with operations people recently. I've got an amazing HR person who, like, again, I feel like she's 300 years. She's just got the bigger perspective that I'm missing as like N of one business owner. And so that's been my biggest shift over the last 2 or 3 years. And it's kind of coming to fruition. It's kind of this beautiful amalgam of awesome right now.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I go back and forth. It's like, do I need a business coach or a therapist? And then I suddenly realize, like, that's why there are so many mindset coaches out there, because you kind of
Yep.
blend the two in a way. But well, we're coming up, I guess, on the end of the show. So, was there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about or go over on the show?
No, I think we can end it with like 2026, blank slate. There's lots of opportunity. I think there's lots of opportunity for creativity in your firm, both marketing and running it. And like 2026, it is going to be a tumultuous year with the midterm election. So let's not take that out of the equation. But when you can revolutionize your business during a period of tumult, like, it's awesome. So I'm optimistic for 2026 for those people who are going to kind of jump on it and grab it and get creative and get better.
Well, and you talked about the elections, and I just kind of like, oh my gosh, they affect marketing rates so much, and it's so frustrating. Never, and
Yeah.
people say they get annoyed with legal marketing. It's like I get annoyed with the congressman who calls me, like, or not literally, the automated congressman who
Yeah.
calls me asking for support like twice a week. It's like, come on, give me a break. Well, where do you want people to go look you up to learn more about you?
It used to be easy. So, like, I have a very strange name. It's Conrad Saam with two A's. So that's easy to find from an SEO perspective if it's not like I'm not doing my job. I'm all over social. And then there's the LHLM podcast. So you can listen to us there as well. But I am fairly easy to find and mostly friendly, unless you work at Scorpion.
Mostly friendly. Oh, okay. Yeah. You got to go after those guys. I'll just confess to you really quick, but for years, I thought your name was Sam, and I
It's
was
fine.
confused at why people called you by your last name first. And then it finally clicked with me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But
That happens. I've lived my life with that. The other thing, when I lived in Ireland for a year and it was like,
oh,
Connor, oh, are you Irish? And I'm like, I just stopped correcting people. So all of my Irish friends, all the friends that I had in Ireland, still think my name is Connor. But,
that was a good Irish accent. That was a
yeah,
special treat. Yeah.
yeah, special treat.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me and being on the show today,
Yeah, thanks
and
for having
everyone
me.
for listening. And I guess we'll just see everyone next time.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, guys.